bottom of the hour, if you're just joining us, Iran launched over 300 projectiles toward Israel Saturday night, but Israel's military says 99% of them were intercepted and no casualties have been reported. The only serious injury so far, according to an IDF spokesperson, was a young girl who was hurt by shrapnel. The U.S. and Israel had been bracing for a strike from Iran ever since Israel attacked an Iranian consulate in Syria 2 weeks ago, in which 2 Iranian generals were killed. In a statement last night, President Biden said he'd convene G7 leaders today to coordinate a response. Meanwhile, Iran is vowing further military action if Israel retaliates. Joining me now is Massachusetts Representative Seth Moulton. Representative Moulton is a member of the Armed Services Committee and a former Marine Corps officer. Thank you for being here. It's good to see you as always. Give me a sense of what this means for the broader conflict, and is there a significant risk of more regional involvement?
Oh, there's absolutely a risk of escalation here. I think it's important to keep in mind that that Israel could lose a lot if this escalates into a wider war. They have got to focus on the war that they have on the ground in Gaza. We need to stand by their side, as we always have, to defend Israel from further attacks. And we have to restore deterrence against Iran. But a wider conflict in the Middle East, it's not in our national security interests. It's not in Israel's national security interests either. And I think, frankly, at the end of the day, Iran doesn't really want that. They have attack on them and their leaders when Israel hit the IRGC commanders in Syria. But I'm not sure that they want to escalate this further either. So let's take the opportunity to de-escalate and focus on what Israel has to do to keep itself safe.
That last sentence there is in direct contrast with what John Bolton is suggesting now, what it is that it's the time to take out Iran's nuclear program. And if he's saying that on television, you're not saying it, but is anybody saying that in the corridors of power?
Well, of course, there are going to be critics who say that. But the problem is John Bolton doesn't have access to the latest intelligence. That just shows how difficult that might be and what the long-term consequences of that could foretell. I mean, the reality is that we had Iran's nuclear program under wraps and under supervision under the Iran nuclear deal. Trump pulled out of that deal, and because of that, Iran is much closer to making a nuclear bomb now. But they've also done a lot to secure their program, to protect it and ensure that it can be reconstituted. So I'm not sure that trying to do that military action, which would unquestionably escalate this conflict into a wider war in the Middle East, is in our interests or in Israel's interests, even though, of course, I agree with even people like John Bolton that we don't want Iran in the long run to have nuclear weapons.
For the last 10 years or so, sitting from this anchor desk, I have asked learned officials like you and others if we know how close Iran is to having a nuclear bomb. Sure, they have IAEA inspections, but do we know if they are completely revelatory in those inspections? Do we have a precise calculation on how close they are?
No, we don't have a precise calculation. I mean, our intelligence is very good. But the bottom line, Alex, is that we do not know as much today about their nuclear program as we did under the deal, because part of the Iran nuclear deal was very close maintenance of supervision, essentially. I mean, we're talking cameras in facilities in Iran with United States eyes on what they were doing. And that went away when Trump pulled out of the deal. So this is another example of how Trump, has a lot of bluster, but actually makes things worse in terms of our national security. There's no question that Iran is much closer to a nuclear bomb than they were under a deal. And there's no question that we have much less clear intelligence on exactly how close they are.
So, sobering question. How would a nuclear-armed Iran change the equation in pursuit of peace in the Middle East? What defense maneuvers would have to be taken?
Well, this was an incredibly successful defense against the Iranian attack. 99% of drones shot down. But if you're talking nuclear, one that gets through that 1% could be absolutely catastrophic. So a nuclear-armed Iran would change the situation. But again, the problem is that you might be able to take out a lot of their nuclear facilities quite quickly if they're able to reconstitute them deeper underground. Then in the long run, you haven't eliminated their program, and you've actually made Iran more likely to use it. At the end of the day, what we want with nuclear weapons, and let's not forget that Israel has had nuclear weapons undeclared for a long time, what we want with nuclear weapons is to actually keep things safe, to further decrease the chances of escalation. In some ways, a lot of people thought that if we supported Ukraine, it could result in a nuclear war with Russia. But I would argue that because Russia and the United States have a balance of nuclear power, that hasn't happened. And while we've been able to successfully support the Ukrainians in pushing back Russia, it's also helped maintain a level of conflict that has not escalated into nuclear war.
Representative Seth Moulton of Massachusetts, always great conversations. Thank you so much for this one. And as I mentioned earlier, President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu